Well, hello, everyone. Good morning and good afternoon. It's lovely to see you all, and welcome to another one of our Foresight Lectures run by the Alpha Group. Let me briefly explain to those of you who are new who and what the Alpha Group is. The Alpha Group has now been established for 8.5 years, nearly 9 years. It is a peer-to-peer executive board, and it works with the owners of businesses and now in 31 countries in 25 languages. It is one of the fastest growing peer-to-peer executive board systems in the world. The way we do it is very simple. In each city, we have an individual or a number of individuals called regional directors. They work with business owners. They come together once every calendar month around a boardroom table from about 7 a.m. to about 2 p.m. So between 6 and 7 hours each month. We never allow more than 20 individuals in any one Alpha Group, no matter how big the city. And we never allow 2 people in the same industry. So it is extremely exclusive. And we make one promise and one promise only. And that is to double the value of their business in 2 to 3 years. And so far, fingers crossed, we have never failed. The Alpha Group launched the Foresight Lectures some time ago, where we bring together some magnificent people who experts in their own particular field, who are able to give us insight, information, education on their particular area. Today, we have a rather wonderful gentleman. We have Anthony Phillips. Anthony has been the director for HR for Nike for Europe, as well as filling many other wonderful roles. And today, Anthony is going to talk to us about leadership, how leadership within an organization can help to deliver transformation, both for individuals and, of course, the organizations as well. So, Anthony, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everybody, or good morning to some, like Charles in Virginia, and good evening to others. I'm looking forward to this opportunity. I've put a few slides together to go through the background, and then I was going to take you through to show how through our software and reporting, the insights both for organization and individuals, how it actually works. When at any stage, if you've got some questions or you disagree with what I say or any observations, please use the chat. And then we'll respond, because there's a lot of experience on this call in terms of the behavioral and transformational change capabilities. So, I'd like to kind of get some interaction feedback, any questions and observations. So I'm going to share my screen now. I'll turn the video off because it's just to make sure that everything's working well. And let's see then what you think and any inputs and observations. So can you see the screen, everybody, okay?
Yes, absolutely, Anthony. Clear.
So what I wanted to share then is that when I was at Nike, I had the privilege of, the challenge was to build the best sports retailing store in the world. Luckily enough, I'd already been involved with the leadership team on how to build the best DIY store to stop Home Depot coming to Europe. So high performance culture was kind of like already kind of quite a lot of expertise, but the Nike brand obviously is able to attract people who are very interested in sports and performance. So when you add people who are really well in terms of managing their mental and physical health in their life as well, not just on the job, and you put them into a high performance culture, what we saw was we had outstanding results from customer service, the ability to cope with ups and downs. The stakes were very high. So, for example, on the opening day of Nike Town Berlin, we had Carl Lewis, Michael Schumacher, Michael Jordan, all there. So the expectations, the brand, the amount of people queuing for hours on end to come into the store, thousands of people. So how do you perform at that level and then continue and cope with the ups and downs? So that's what's informed the thinking of Welcome, was how could you create insights, develop psychometric software? Because when we look for psychometrics, you could find psychometrics which understood personality, team working, leadership style, but nothing around how people manage their performance and wellness. And also from an analytic point of view, how could you understand kind of how well people were, how well managed were they, and how did that impact on the organizational performance? So that's the kind of background to the thinking. And what I wanted to do, my understanding from my briefing is that on this call, we've got people looking at this from a coaching point of view. So people who are coaching human beings, teams and organizations. Could be value, we work across like employers, education, healthcare, etc. So the value of the psychometrics and understanding that by using psychometrics that Welcome has developed, that the benefits of that to the individual, but to the coach in terms of being able to get very fast insights, build the trust relationship. But probably the biggest advantage is that being able to evidence that the coach in terms of performance and wellness is making a real difference. So you should see evidence of how a coach could benefit. From a business owner point of view, I see that the performance and wellness of people is probably the largest untapped area of performance for any organization where human beings make a difference, be it customer service, sales, could be accidents, wherever. So I hope that from a business ownership point of view, if you're running any size of business, you'll see how much difference it can make. And even if you're doing, self-employed for yourself. And then the last part is kind of from a leadership point of view, that the approach of what is 3D leadership and how does that help leaders develop new capabilities which drive then better KPIs, competitive advantage for those organizations where they're working. So I'll come back to those at the end to see if, but that's what I'd like to try and deliver then for you. If you look at around the world, and I've just picked different statistics that you see that the wellness agenda partly sparked, I guess, but COVID kind of created this whole awareness around mental health. I think people talked about NCDs. A lot of investment in terms of performance and wellness was around absence management to date. But when you look at the kind of impacts, you can see that mental health is low. There is a realization that mental and physical health are combined. So even if you look at NCDs like type 2 diabetes, 57% of type 2 diabetes, the root causes are around stress. So you can see the interrelation between mental and physical health. There is a huge cost in terms of productivity. But one of the things that is becoming more apparent, which I'll share next, is that many of the approaches to date have been tackling symptoms and never get to the root cause at the individual or personal level. And that's a critical thing. So when you look at kind of the opportunities for people in this area globally, that there's probably now a real appetite and recognition that there needs to be a fundamental change to the approach of how you boost personal and organizational productivity and wellness. So if you look at Deloitte's global findings, is that when they've assessed all the investments in a very rigorous report, they found that it's the root causes that need to be addressed. So I'll show you some examples around could be high blood pressure, but it could be also like employee turnover, or why are sales in one store higher than in some stores than, say, in others. So what are the root causes? McKinsey's is, when you look at kind of health, generally people are living longer, but the active lifespan is less. So, and there's more risk now, both mental and physical, of ill health. So although the longevity is something that people are striving for and are willing to spend more money on as a consumer, really we haven't cracked the route to strong health over a period of time. And yet that's critical, because when you look at the demographics and economics, be it in the UK, for example, or many developed economies, if we can't increase the working age by 5+ years or more, then we won't be able to have enough people working long enough to pay for the other people. And that's, if you look, for example, in Africa, I know we've got somebody here from Durban, you'll see that in Africa, they've got the lowest ratio of medical health people to the population. And unfortunately, as the populations are becoming richer, they're becoming more unwell. So how do we break that cycle? And then from an insurance point of view, health and life, that they recognize that the solutions there, although they're insuring people, the premiums keep going up on, say, health insurance, because they haven't found the solutions on how to help people manage their health better. So people are becoming more unwell, premiums go up as the claims go up. So there's a real appetite and need for change in this kind of space. So I don't know if anybody's got any questions, observations about that. Do people agree, disagree? I'll just pause if anybody's got any burning questions. I don't know. Gerald, does anybody put the hand up on the chat? Anybody? Alexandra's raised her hand.
Hi, Anthony. So I think my question would be regarding to the Deloitte statement about addressing the causes of mental health illnesses, and in general, like well-being, insufficiency, like low well-being. So whilst it's important to address the root cause, I just feel like sometimes in very big companies, there isn't enough scope to address all of these issues at that level. Sometimes we need to focus on very short-term solutions. So I was just thinking, what kind of view do you have on that? Do you think this is a structural change that needs to happen? Like, how do you see the way in which we can address the root cause? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very good. So Deloitte is doing it from a, just to be clear, that's their research across many employers. So it's not them as an employer. So it's in their consultancy hat. I think that there is this issue about, you know, people signing up and buying. If you look at the amount of apps or giving apps to people on mindfulness or running campaigns, but when you see the approach that I'm kind of sharing, it's much more about embedding kind of performance and wellness as a way of life for individuals and organizations. And you can start that very quickly and make a difference, but in doing it in a way which is embedding it. So let's come back, Alexander, at the end to see if you agree that that you can tackle both the short-term and the long-term challenges. There's a couple of other people got a question. John?
Hi, Anthony. Nice to meet you, and apologies for being a few minutes late. I'm really interested in this subject and passionate about mental health. And I was wondering what you thought about, I think there's a study, I can't remember the name of it. It's one of the longest health studies ever. It started in 1936, I think, and they've been monitoring a set of people. The findings from that, Anthony, are that people's close relationships, whether it's with a partner, business colleagues, friends outside work, is a higher predictor of longevity and happiness than anything else, and can be more important than stopping smoking, for example. I just wondered whether you'd come across that and what your thoughts were.
Yeah, that's a very good question. So you'll see almost in the next stage of what I'm going to show is that when you look at what is the definition of performance and wellness and how do you foster it, either as an individual or an organization, it's not a medical agenda. There's a lot of more determinants. And when you look at satisfaction with family life and social life, which we track in our profiling, they're key indicators which then correlate with like mental health. And then you can start to see. And in fact, some of the statistics show that loneliness is a bigger health risk than smoking.
Yeah.
And you'll see that the approach that we're recommending is a whole organizational approach. And exactly what you've said, John, that you need to if you don't look at things like, let's say, remote working now, and if you don't have some sense of, are people lonely and satisfied with their social life or and their work life, then, there is a risk that you could have people high turnover, quiet quitting, and mental health problems.
Yeah, lovely. Thanks, Anthony.
Anybody else before I move on? Okay. So what Welcome's kind of approach is, it's a combination between software and a human touch. And the reason for that is that the software is designed to help generate the insights, the recommendations, and provide access to resources. And for some people that in their belief systems, for example, we look at that, what we call the ABCs, attitudes, beliefs, and constraints. Some people are driven, and once you give them their profile and their development suggestions, they're able to move forward and be successful. But for many other people, they want either group or one-to-one human services, not just around, say, personal wellness coaching, but through the profiling, you might identify low mental health, lack of nutritional awareness, financial, the mental health for counseling. So all of these different human services can be vital to the individual. What's important, the point that John was just making, is that we see that when you're looking at the how well somebody is, it's not, like, for example, in the UK, often the question, and the legal question, is how stressed are people at work? The question I think should be asked is, how well are you as a human being in life? And that's what the profiling approach, you can see here, it's based on 9 dimensions. The underpinning approach that we took, which we found has applicability over many timescales, is the Lazarus model. So it's looking at stresses or challenges coming at you. What are your current capabilities to deal with those challenges and stresses? And then what are the outcomes in terms of mental health, physical health, and satisfaction? So that can work in many different ways. I mean, we've helped people, say, pass their driving test when they failed twice because they cracked under the pressure with the examiner in the car. Job interviews, assessment centres. I helped assistant chief constable become a chief constable because he was able to mentally and physically prepare. But that can be the same for people working as tax assessors and working through and maintaining their concentration levels, or customer service people coping with the ups and downs of behaviour, some people complaining at them, for example. So we see that people aren't human resources, they're human beings. And I think that now that recognition is growing. The second thing is that people, I think, are fed up of surveys, and what they want is that if they're going to spend time answering questions, they want some direct output. And if you look around the world, we've seen that the responses of surveys and almost the overuse of them, that people are getting survey fatigued. So what you see here is that we're collecting the data, people are holding a mirror to themselves in a private and confidential way. So whatever work you're doing in this space, I think people want a payback for the information they're putting in. And you can see that is also being fostered through the use of wearables and devices. People are looking for fast feedback on, how am I doing? I think the other thing is that we see that the language around this area, that when you look at resilience, for example, to me, you know, the UK, for example, has latched onto this word resilience, and it has, to me, a lot of negative connotations. It's almost, excuse my language, it's like you need to come and be resilient working here, because basically our organisation's crap. There's going to be a lot of ups and downs, things won't work. Whereas if you turn it the other way around and say, we need high performance people, the Olympian standard of customer service, because we want to perform at high performance, that's a completely different sell and pitch. And I think that people working in this space, that's far more appealing around the world. And the last point, I'm actually going to Geneva next week, and one of the things is to promote that personal wellness management with the international organizations like the World Health Organization, but personal wellness management should be recognized as a fifth life capability. So reading, writing, maths, using technology, and managing your personal health. And that's why we're launching a certificate in personal performance and wellness management to enable people to show that they've studied and developed that capability. At the organizational level, the approach, which is the kind of the next generation approach, is no longer taking kind of single kind of functional approach, looking at, okay, we need to look at our HR practices and review our competency frameworks, our recruitment processes, and then maybe a business consultant look at our processes and technology independently. Although over the years now you could say, well, we have an HR business partner who's meant to join up the two. But then when you look at health, for example, you might have occupational health, but they don't really sit on the board level and really kind of make the case of what is the relation between these three areas. So if you're looking at, for example, a retail operation, how do you work out how many people you need at certain times for customer service levels? What energy levels, how many, what kind of skills? And if you involve people in that scheduling process, so you improve the personal work control scores, and they feel not as widgets in the system, but are involved in that system, then you've got a better scheduling system, you've got participation, ownership, and the outcomes. And by increasing the personal work control scores, you're going to have a better predictor of and retention of people. So you're going to have less short-term absence because people feel more engaged and motivated, and you're going to have less employee turnover because they feel that they are participating, involved in the business. But the other thing is, as I mentioned, is that through adopting a kind of profiling approach, that surveys put the pressure on the employer to act. You fill in the survey, sit back and say, this is what we think about whatever the topics are, and it puts the pressure on the employer. Through using profiling, and that you're rebalancing the accountability so that individual, team and organization can each take action. And so what we've got then is, not going back to what Alexandra was saying, is that by adopting this approach, you're moving an organization, the leadership, to a way of thinking which becomes a way of life. So as a 3D leader, you'll see that want the leadership to start to think about, as they're moving around their business, like take that retail, store manager, when he's walking around, or she is the store, then thinking about, well, you know, what are the interrelations? Are the people's customer service levels maintained throughout the day? What about concentration levels? How do they maintain access and stay hydrated? So the leader starts to think better in this 3D way. Can we provide them the analytics to show them kind of intelligence in that way? The leader needs to manage their own wellness to be a role model, but equally to be able to perform well, so they're not anxious or aggressive or bullying or irritable. And the last thing for the leader is, how can they sell this approach to their people as human beings? So how do they motivate and engage others to think and act in this 3D way and manage their wellness? And by doing that, what you end up with is not just short term as you start that journey. You embed this approach as a way of life from the top down at the board level through to the frontline leaders, and everybody involved in the organization has this kind of sense of This is about performance and wellness, not just at work, but in life. So in summary, what you're doing is operating simultaneously at two levels. You're offering the individual people as human beings a way of managing their performance in life, at the same time generating insights which provide a 3D analytics to provide the insights on how well you're doing for each team and organization, and then providing then the education at the leadership level to use those analytics to take then the right actions. So health and wellness becomes embedded as a discipline, just like HR, marketing, logistics, etc. The benefits of doing this are these kinds of things, that we see that we're able to increase the number of high-performing employees by over 50%. So when you take the current ratio and saying, how can we have more of those types of people? So when you ask a chief executive, or if you look at your own business and you say, okay, what's the characteristics of these high-performing businesses? They're often high energy, got a can-do attitude. They can cope with ups and downs. They always come to work. They have a positive mindset. How do you create more of those kinds of people? And in doing that, what you find is that those people will outperform and give you return on investment, probably of 30, 40, 50% more on their employment costs versus other people. And what, in taking this approach, you're not siloing mental and physical health, you're actually tackling both together. And what we see through the approach is that both mental and physical health can be very significantly improved together. So it's not either or, it's both. And then the insights, by taking this approach, you start to look at things in a very different way. And in the age of AI, I don't know how many people have come across things like IBM Watson, but AI engines have tried to crunch data on people's health and organizational performance. But what they've pumped in is generally health records and things, but it doesn't really give you the why. And in this approach here from Wellcome, what we're able to do is provide the missing why to why are these stores outperforming others? Why does this part of the business has higher labor turnover? Why do these people have more burnout or more health claims or more accidents? So by adopting this approach and getting the leaders to thinking this way, you start to get into the root causes. So just from a kind of mental health point of view, I just took this as an example. If you look at personal mental health, one of the sad things is that there is this relationship at the individual level that if you're mentally unwell, you're 2 to 3 times more likely to be physically unwell and vice versa. But if you look at, say, 20, 30% of people, it can be at that high now, but very few people, only about 1 in 5 or less, who know that they've got suboptimal mental health, actually take any action. So there's this kind of waiting for people to take counselling. You see that even in universities, student counselling, but at work as well. But providing counselling isn't the solution. It's too late. But also, many people don't emotionally want to commit to and be labelled that I need counselling. So how can you create services which are much more proactive and preventative, and also, as I said, tackle the root causes? As an organisation, if you go to the middle, on average, if you, through our many years and thousands of people and organisations that we've profiled, that an average workforce will have about 18% of people who've got well-developed capabilities. And I'll show you this in a report later. About 58 are in the middle and 24 are low. But as people age, then it's a natural thing that your physical health particularly is going to deteriorate. And a simple measure of that is if you go to the gym, you'll see on the running machine, it asks you your age. And the reason it does that is because it says 220 minus your heart rate. And as you age, your heart rate, resting heart rate, will go up by 1 beat a year, typically. But you can actually change that by staying active. Your resting heart rate can stay the same. So fortunately, my resting heart rate is still around 40 beats a minute and has been for the last 30, 40 years. So you can maintain and change this. But so going back, a lot of the solutions on the market, the approaches that people take are tackling the symptoms. So if you look at the 1 in 8 people in this country could be on high blood pressure pills. It's just a solution. You've got high blood pressure, but the real question is why, at a personal level or organizational. And so I think that going back to what Deloitte and McKinsey's were saying, is that we need to then use an approach which gets much more to the root causes, takes a whole life and a whole organizational approach. So, you know, we can show these kinds of things, the testimonials. This one's from Africa, where we're launching 3,000 businesses to tackle these areas in terms of health and wellness to break the cycle. So what we see is that you need intelligence. So I think for an individual, we offer a personal wellness account through the psychometrics. I mean, psychometrics is designed to help you understand your human behavior. So I'll show you how we do that from how we understand how you manage your personal performance and wellness. And then on the other side of it, how do we create this 3D analytics so leaders can start at a team level, organizational or multi-sector approach to take action. There are some big barriers in this approach. So people are obviously very concerned. If you ask an individual as an employee to look at their whole life, you know, there are questions there about their family. So some very private questions, for example, finances, etc. And we're asking questions about their perceptions of the leadership culture, etc. So how do you reassure and maintain anonymity from reporting? So that's very key. How do you get works councils and trade unions on your side? Because if you don't get it right, then those will close you down. Like in Germany, the works council will just say, no, we're not going to, this isn't right for our workforce, or the trade unions will do the same in South Africa or in the UK, for example. So it's very important that in adopting this approach, you're very conscious that managing data, anonymity, privacy, all of these concerns have to be overcome. From a human touch point of view, what we recognized is that people, if you're going to work in this area, that you need to be qualified. So we train people as wellness champions navigators. We train and certify people on how to be a personal wellness reviewer, to understand an individual profile and help them be motivated and get to the best value. And also for coaches, we're not training coaches, but to give coaches, like any other psychometric instrument, how you can use it. And the same at the team and organizational level. And as I said, that, you know, to recognize and foster that if you have a competency around personal performance and wellness management and you develop it, then also as a plus, you should have an educational qualification which recognizes that people have actually studied it. And that's what we're doing around the world, and the same with the 3D leadership. So what I wanted to do was show you for the last 10 minutes some live examples before any other questions and answers, but I'll just pause again if anybody's got any further observations or questions before I show you some examples of how we enable leaders to get the analytics and make become a 3D leader and make these types of decisions. Anybody got any questions want to ask now? No? So the kind of analytics that we believe gets to the root causes and the understanding, if you go back to those 9 dimensions that I showed on the slide, what we're doing through the psychometric profiling is we're using, we have about 160 questions. It takes now about 20 minutes or so to complete the psychometrics. It's got longer over the years as people have recognized and told us that we've missed things. So things like financial wellness, participation. If you don't include questions like that, John mentioned about loneliness. If the profiling isn't complete, then you're missing gaps in your intelligence and you're potentially missing the root causes. But what we're able to do from this brand ambassador index is we can cluster people into these areas. So we use about 70 different metrics from the profiling to segment the workforce in this area. So, and if you correlate, for example, the impact or the return on investment of having more of these brand ambassadors, that these people will have probably 40% or plus more return on investment or employment costs. If you look here as a simple example, I just pulled this one up here. When you look at the risks of accidents, if you're in oil and gas or transportation, like a courier company like DHL or transport, you want to obviously minimize the risk of accidents. And we track accidents at work, to and from work at home. And you can see that there is almost a treble times the risk of an accident of people who what we would class as a brand destroyer versus a brand ambassador. So there's a clear line of benefit if you're in those kind of sectors where risks, but this risk could also be translated, say, as a healthcare worker or others, or as a tax assessor, because it's the same thing. If you lose concentration, maybe you make a mistake, you code wrongly the tax refund, or in healthcare, you make a mistake. If you look at the amount of litigation in the US and the UK around health professionals, it's not because they're not trained, it's because they've lost concentration. So when you see these kind of statistics going back to this report, you can see what is the value proposition. I think the other thing is that you see here that we've got a motivation engagement index and a performance and productivity. Often people talk about wellness and engagement almost as if they're the same. You can have people who are engaged by having good job satisfaction, and that will have some elements of being well because they've got satisfaction mentally. But for example, it doesn't mean that they're able to concentrate enough. So if they don't manage their hydration, then they're more liable to lose concentration. So just because people are engaged doesn't mean that they're well. So this one page report to me provides for a 3D leadership approach. You can start to see, for example, if you score low in job security, how does that impact on your health? So if we look at the data from this type of report, you can see, let's just go to go one up to blood pressure. This is just, we could do this with absence levels or sales, it doesn't matter. But what we've got here are, what are the factors which are correlated with personal lifestyle from which have a risk of generating people with high blood pressure. And when you look here, these are the factors that we find. So if you're seeing that people, for example, are exercising regularly, then you've got, better chance that they're not going to have burnout or high blood pressure, for example. And that's, most doctors would say, yeah, we know all of that. That's very easy. So instead of giving pills now, we're increasingly trying to get people to, say, practice good nutrition or maybe pay more attention to sleep. But then this is the other side of the coin. So if you look here, what we've done is we have these statistically mined items, and these are the ones which are correlated with people at risk of high blood pressure, or it could be burnout. And you could see here in the red, in this particular organization, for example, trouble to adopt a new technology is at 2.4, for example. So it's pretty low. So if this was a group of home workers, remote workers, and you're trying to get them to adopt new technology and you're not doing a good job, then the risks are that they're going to struggle, they're going to get stressed, and they're going to get kind of health issues. They might turn to comfort eating, which is going to drive their weight, get frustrated, they could get more irritable, so it could mean that customer service levels get impacted. If you look at a simple one here, which has got, you know, high facial validity, the amount of bullying in the workplace is, if you're working in a toxic environment where there's a lot of bullying, then people are more at risk of high blood pressure. So as a coach, either for an individual or a team, what we want to try and do is get to the root causes of these aspects. And we can do the same, as I said. I've shown you data on things like accidents, energy levels, etc. If you look at other data, so we can see, for example, when we look here, so this is coming through, we're able statistically, and so, well, what are the root causes maybe of anxiety, people leaving? And when you analyze all the different aspects, in this particular case, for example, job security is statistically significantly higher than the norms. And so if this organization is going through an outplacement or a restructuring process, like many technology businesses, people, you know, if you start to impact or they're worried about their job, that has a kind of real potential repercussions from a mental health, then leading to physical, then to the KPIs. So how do you kind of then help people to cope with those understandings that maybe their job's at risk, but they can stay positive and deliver? Because it might take you a year to kind of work through your business transformation of who's staying and who's leaving. If you look at other data then, and you want to say, well, you know, we want to boost the energy levels throughout. When you look at the factors which are correlated to energy levels in the workforce, so obviously workload and free time from work, has time to do exercise. When you look at kind of like interruptions, so all of these areas here, this one here has time to do exercise. So if you're working in a contact center, for example, and you're scheduling and you're always told when your lunch break is, rather than when you need to recharge yourself. Because as a human being, you should know when your energy levels are getting lower, when you need to refuel, eat the right things, maybe go outdoors and get some daylight. So if your employer doesn't give you that self-determination of when to exercise, so that's a key driver on being able to maintain your personal energy levels. So going back to this leadership style and trusting people to say, why is this person doing this at 11:30 rather than at 12:30 and eating? Maybe because they had an hour's commute to work and they had breakfast a lot earlier than anybody else, and they need to go now and exercise and recharge an hour earlier because of that commute. So you've got all of these insights here of trying to help people think in a different way. And as I said, going back and looking at it from a complete picture. If we turn it on its head now and say, well, what about the individual? What do they do? So this is an individual's profile. This is their own private and confidential account. And what you see here is that the person, unfortunately, has got a high BMI, so they're overweight and they're inactive. If you look at the amount of obesity in many countries, it's rising. In the UK, it's been rising for many years, and we have stagnant productivity per head. But why? Why is this person overweight? If they go to the doctor, they'll say, look, you know, you're not eating right. You need to go on a diet. But how is that going to change someone's behavior? When you look at their profile, you can see that their pace of life is red, and you click on it, and you can start to see from the definition explains it. You can see further that time pressure is an issue. What it is that this person, if you look at the overall and get to the facts, that because they're time poor, they don't plan their dietary needs ahead, they don't have time for physical activity, maybe they're not sleeping well because they use their mobile phones before they go to bed. So that their mind's still spinning over, they don't have a quiet time, the mind doesn't switch off. So as a consequence, they don't have sleep well, they don't have that as much energy. When you look at the health risks, then you can start to see that they're at risk of high blood pressure and heart and stroke, for example. So what could you do? Well, you can then give them like an Evolve or a blood pressure readings and do a 7-day evaluation. Just going to the doctor and having one reading isn't a very good picture. The best in class way of tracking your health is to do it over a period of time. And with blood pressure, taking 2 readings a day, morning and evening, over say 5 to 7 days is the best way. But having done that, okay, this person's probably going to find that they have high blood pressure. So what can they do? Well, going back to this pace of life scores, kind of then it seems to be the need to create time. So when you look at the development suggestions that are recommended, it's problem solving and being assertive. Why? Because they probably are dealing with the symptoms of problems, they never go away. They could be financial, it could be relationships, it could be technology, whatever the problems are, they're not tackling them. So they keep coming back and new problems come. Or it could be on their to-do list, but they never really say no. They never prioritize well enough. It could be their wife, children, whoever. So how can we help them create time? When they've got time, they could invest in structured pursuits better and recharge. And so the impact that you're looking for in a sustainable way is by taking those small steps, then the overall index score has gone up to 76 and 47. The BMI has become more healthy. They started to exercise. Their pace of life has gone from red to amber. So by tackling the root causes at the individual level, you're starting to make a sustainable change. So just in summary then, but just going back to what I said is that by taking a combination of the personal health at the individual level and looking at the organization and life outside of work, what you can end up with is a way of life which will generate higher productivity, more people become more well on a longer term basis, longevity becomes a realistic goal, they can work longer, less burnout, they become more productive. As the organization, economies become more productive, become more well. So we're changing the way of the world to become a virtually healthier, and it's increasingly linked from a healthy human beings to a healthy planet. So it's also becoming part of the sustainability agenda. So just finishing off the last minute or so is, as I said, by using, we believe that psychometrics, which actually really ask the right questions from a whole life performance and wellness point of view, will provide you the data and the evidence that you can actually boost people's mental and physical health. Through the analytics, you can actually correlate those to any of the KPIs, make informed decisions and drive improvements in those KPIs. And if you as a leader start to think in a 3D way of how your health, HR and business within your organization are interrelated and start to understand those better, you'll start to make smarter decisions, look at the root causes, and you'll end up with being a better leader. And that those leadership behaviors can be done at all levels, and that will drive also your KPIs. So that's basically the approach of Welcome and how we help organizations and individuals around the world.
Well, thank you, Anthony. That was absolutely fascinating, and I do mean that. I've got my pen and I've filled up 2 pages here with notes. There have been a couple of comments in the chat. A couple of people have basically said, will you send out pricing models for the certification? And another, would you please send the PowerPoint and info on the certification? So perhaps if you let Julia or Colin have that, we can send it out to the people who came on today's call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we can send some information about those things. It depends on where people are. Maybe also we'll have a conversation with Colin or maybe with yourself, Gerard, as well, just to have a chat before we do that.
Okay, and there's a couple of hands up. Can I just remind everyone, we have exactly 6.5 minutes before we'll have to cut the call. Alexandra, you first, and then Ian.
Yeah, sorry, I just wanted to say thank you, Anthony. That was very insightful. I was wondering if we can also add to the list about personal certification organizational opportunities, as I'm interested in that. So if you can add that information would be great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alexandra. Thank you. And over to you, Ian.
Anthony, thank you so much indeed for that. It's a wonderful look at what is required, what is needed in business. But that is very much dare I say it, a firefighting situation, one that we actually desperately need. But what about prevention, and what age should that start?
Well, I mean, what's increasingly becoming evident through the research is that when you start to look at people around 16, 18, 20 years old, how they manage their personal wellness has repercussions into their midlife. So if you're already obese by that age, then there is predictions in the US, for example, that there could start hip replacements around 25 to 30 years old for many more people. But also there's the mental part. There's the health risks which seem to be coming through even on the mental side, that if you don't have the right lifestyle behaviors at the age of, say, 18 to 20, but midlife, there's going to be other health issues. So I think that's critical. But the other thing is that if you want to help people, like you take apprentices in the UK and you want to bring them into the workforce and drive higher productivity, then you need to help them work in a different way and educate them earlier. And so that's why one of the big areas that I'm passionate about is actually having this personal certificate as part of an apprenticeship program, or as a pupil at 16, or as part of your university education. Because if you look at universities, for example, they want to retain students, they want students who are employable. But the thing is, what they tend to offer now is purely counselling, and that just waiting for people to become unwell, or the students quit and they lose, and it's a lose-lose. The student quits and they lose the tuition. So I think that, you know, certainly by the age of 16 to 18, you need to have a good foundation. And even the daily wellness habits like hydration, the more daily habits, we track 10 of those. People who have more than, you know, say 4 or 5 of those 10 habits each day generally outperform others in the workplace. We've correlated with performance ratings, for example.
Thank you, Anthony.
I would welcome the opportunity, Anthony, to speak with you outside of the meeting, because I think we've probably got a lot to discuss.
Okay.
And for those of you who don't know, Ian is a great advocate of child and adolescent coaching and has launched one of the top programs in Europe, actually. So, and thank you, Ian. One last question from John Rice. Over to you.
Thanks, Jared. Really fascinating. Thank you, Anthony, for spending time with us. I wondered, I know it came out in the program or the presentation, but I wondered how important you feel that personally driven emotional intelligence is key to this. I don't doubt that some employees are very caring, and we know that others that aren't, and we know others that play at it. And I'm wondering where the focus needs to be. I agree on education, but it needs to be on an individual level, I think, initially. I know it needs to be supported by an organization, but it's a bit like chicken and egg, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, one of the most insightful things, 28% of people we profile don't believe they can make a difference to their health. So they have an external locus control.
Yeah.
So if you look at goal setting, for example, from even a health performance, if you don't understand the mindset around the locus control of the individual, you're going in blind from a goal setting point of view. So that's a key area. But then when you look, you know, it comes back also to how many people can do this by themselves, how many people need human support. So that's where the wellness champion or training leaders in this area. So it's a bit like when you go to the gym. Some people, I don't need a personal trainer when I go to the gym. I need my plan, but after self-motivate. But for many people, they'd never get through the exercise program that didn't have a plan. So it's about being personalizing the solution to the individual. And ideally, hopefully, like say in Africa, where we're launching these businesses, the reason we're doing there is because then you can make the local labor affordable to people. Because what you don't want to do is just because, you know, my mindset is I need human help, but can I afford it? And we're coming up with some new ones where there's millions of refugees, highly qualified around the world.
Anthony, I'm so sorry for interrupting you. We have another meeting beginning and we've actually got, the waiting room is filled.
All right.
I'm going to have to draw this to a close, everyone. Thank you all for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Anthony, for giving a magnificent talk. It was great. This will be recorded and the recording will be put up within about 24 to 48 hours.